Afternoon, good morning, or good afternoon, or whether should I say, whenever you're watching this, be it tomorrow, next week, or next month. So, what I'd like to get you guys to do before I get started on the topic that I'm going to discuss today, this is going to be a regular feature every week. So, what I want you to do is, if you're watching on the live, obviously come and say hello, hashtag live in the comments below. And if you're watching on the replay, as I expect many of you will do, obviously put hashtag replay. So what we're going to talk about today is how to get rid of that negative critic inside you. First off, what I want you to do is, if this is the case, is to go seek professional help, to go to people that are obviously qualified to do it. So be it psychologists, psychiatrists, to go deeper into your problems that are holding you back. That would be my first port of call. If that isn't the case, obviously, the thing that is holding you back from your goals. How you doing, Louisa Brown? Thanks for jumping on the live. What is holding you back from the goals? We're going to discuss that today. So this is I'm going to break it down to certain areas of the critic being inside you is, generally speaking, going to be some sort of stress, some sort of trigger that you've got to, no matter how badly you want to change it, you can't. This is the difficulty that you find yourself in. And for example's sake, and this is true, I have done that on numerous occasions where I have wanted to change the status quo, and however hard I tried, or however you may try, that won't budge. So when it comes to obviously diminishing that stressor or that trigger, you have two ultimatums. You have the to reduce it is to go and do something else, and to avoid it, thus it diminishes the stress level that you feel, thus you feel that you've solved the issue, which in fact you haven't. And because you haven't looked to resolve that issue, obviously over time that's only going to get bigger. And the other one is, because we don't accept across the board, and I'm gonna stigmatize the men on this one because it's a fact. Because most men, for the majority, aren't okay with their feelings. Thus, I will do everything that I can to be able to suppress how I feel. Ultimately, where those individuals are okay with things is anger, frustration. They're a negative emotion. But where people feel that they are have a negative critic within themselves, is other emotions that they want to suppress. You can't do that until you accept every emotion. If I was to ask you, why are you on those occasions where you're happy, you can't answer that question because you don't look to want to change that status quo. It's, I feel happy, so why would I want to analyze it to the second degree as to why I feel that way? However, when it's everything else other than joy, passion, happiness, love, I want to scrutinize it and put it under a microscope. We're okay when we're happy, but we're not okay when we're not. So, and that is why the aspect of, to a certain extent, being uncomfortable with the critic inside you is difficult, because you, for however many reasons you want to change that, until you come to accept that being your normality, it's going to be tough. And I know that better than probably most, because at the beginning of the pandemic, so we're only talking about 2 years ago. I wanted to change my mental state because I didn't want to feel a certain way. I didn't want to feel comfortable with either feeling low, depressed, anxious, how we want to put it. I want to feel anything but that. But because you can't change that, you want to. So my point is, because you're not able to be comfortable with where you're at the particular moment, it's frustration. It's frustrating, and you want to do anything but be in the emotional that you find yourself. But if the other foot was on the foot, people would challenge you on the external. Why are you happy all the time? They're not bothered if you're miserable because everybody got their problems. But obviously, from a happiness perspective, I know everybody wants to get rid of the negative critic, but you're always going to be your harshest critic. You have got to be able to diminish that to some extent, to be able to challenge it from when it's right and when it's wrong. We are hardwired to self-preserve ourselves for the betterment of our survival. So why do we do it from this is, if you think of it logically, this question, why would the human body or the human brain want to be always think of the negative when it doesn't always serve us? That is probably a complex question, but if you looked at it rationally, it's irrational. Thank you, Brenda Rossi, for jumping on and saying hello. So I'm going to break it down in a little bit more detail as where specific areas of people where they will be their actual own worst critic. Obviously, disorganization is a major trigger for people. So while you're creative and engaged, you lack planning and add pressure. So I fall in both of these camps. So I'm organized and I'm also disorganized. So I can be creative into the fact that by having a disorganization, my brain has to be that clever in terms of I have to be able to recall where everything is. So thus, I'm very creative and engaged. Thus, I'll be able to utilize that. However, where it's a disadvantage and it's a major stressor is, where did I leave my keys? Where did I leave my phone? And it's an unwanted stress on top of your family circumstances, your financial circumstances, your housing circumstances. How it's an uncontrollable. It's not a big deal. If we go hopping back to 10, 15, 20 years ago, the mobile phone or the cell phone wasn't a big deal. Of if I had to communicate with somebody, I pick up the telephone. If I need to talk to somebody, I talk to them. But because of it being a part and parcel of our day-to-day life, obviously it's a big deal. Small things have a huge impact on your mood. So obviously that's minute, me talking about a cell phone, but it's a small thing. If you were to get up late in the morning, obviously then playing catch up the rest of the day, you're rushing to work, you're worrying about all have or haven't you forgotten something. However, if you set your alarm earlier for a more relaxed start, write your to-do list in order of importance. And I did this for a client recently because he was looking at a to-do list in as a task to be done. Obviously, I'm going to say to the ladies, this is more common. But if you were not to have accomplished all your to-do list at the end of the day, is that day a success or is it a failure? Obviously, put that in the comments as to what that would be for you. I obviously got that particular client to relook at how he prioritized his to-do list in terms of he was prioritizing what he deemed was most important. However, I kind of used, and it's something I actually do, of using a traffic light system as in order of priority from an energy perspective now, not priority in terms of what needs to get done, which is going to be the most and the least demanding for you throughout that day. Obviously, red is most demanding, and green is I get amazing satisfaction from it. And obviously, for him, one particular task that he was putting off, which is obviously going to increase your level of stress, because I find the task to be boring, stressful, or terrifying, and obviously those are elevated in extremes. I'm going to avoid it. So what he was doing was leave it to last thing in the day. What is likely to happen as a result? You're not going to do it. I'm going to put it off. I'm going to put it off to tomorrow, put it off to next week, put it off to next, or never do it at all. Because if I can avoid, coming back to what I said originally, that emotion that this task is going to cause me, I don't feel as bad as I would have done. So I feel comfortable. Robbie, kind of a thanks for jumping on. Whereas if you put it in order of, from a traffic light perspective, as what is the actual energy expenditure, so put it from more from a fitness perspective, I need to block out more time to be able to do said task. I need to be able to prioritize that it's done when I have the most energy possible. So that could be first thing in the morning for you, that could be middle of the day. You could be a night owl that I am. So sometimes I will put tasks like that later on in the day because it's like, well, I'm alert and I can focus 100% on that task and smash it out the park. And his perspective on his said task changed from a red to an amber to his overview of it is I'm the best at it to technically it's a green. So in a split second, he's gone from red to green. And that is obviously a criticism of oneself because if I can put it off, I feel guilty, I feel awful, I feel like I'm failing, I feel like I quit. To I've had a 5 minute conversation with him, I'm the dog's bollocks, to use a British term, that I'm the best at it. Even if I was to delegate it, it wouldn't be as good. To in an instant, that task, I'm amazing at it. Thus, it's not a big deal. We go on to point number 2 of this: being a warrior. See, everybody's going to be a warrior, but if I put aside the anxiety that makes us function as human beings, if we didn't have an arousal level to make us anxious of what could arise by just crossing the road, we would never actually do it. So being a warrior is obviously productive, and from this video and the examples I'm using, this is counterproductive. So if you're an over or an extra conscious, you have pretty much an overthinking brain of, you're very pessimistic to the point of I have a tendency to do this of worst case scenario of if everything was to go wrong, this is what could happen. I shouldn't laugh about it, but this is true. If you did this for an extended period of time, you would pretty much be running on empty, because for your brain to be able to do this, you're having to expend energy just by thinking about it, and even you're even more prone to panic attacks of thinking like this. Obviously, there's the term natural worry because it makes people think it is something that they can't change. Obviously, the way that you think you can change, and at the end of the day, you have a choice. Sorry, you have a chance at an opportunity. Obviously, you can go in either direction with that particular chance as an opportunity spurned, or an opportunity to be taken with both hands. That is a choice. So in terms of the rationale, where I'm going with that, in terms of you can do 101 different exercises to get from a thought of worrying to you jot it down to, and obviously the exercise is available in this group of looking at what you can and can't control. And obviously the exercise I did with a client, and even though they were examples whereby he deemed that the example was out of his was in his control, but it really wasn't. It lifted a massive weight on his shoulders, as I can't really, as much as I want to control the outcome of that particular worry, I have no control over it. And when you get a grasp of an exercise, or if you actually sat and thought about something over a period of 5 minutes, of even if you got angry with it and said, I can't change that because it's in the past, that phrase or sentence will alleviate a lot of stress immediately, because you kind of go, I can't change that, thus you accept it and you move on. Obviously, write things down is a major thing, and a lot of people don't do it, or they do it initially and then don't stop to do it. This will work with criticism, this will work with worry, this will work with results, this will work with pretty much anything. If you have the stuff to go back to, you can analyze more rationally and make better decisions. Obviously, you feel more calm as a result of writing something down. That's why you should never go to bed having 101 things running through your head, because that's one aspect that's going to keep you awake, or will keep you awake all throughout the night, or you're going to have intermittent sleep as a result. And obviously, if you wrote it down, you're more likely to remember what it was first thing in the morning, because the idea is still fresh, and then you could expand on that for argument's sake. And obviously, worst case scenarios haven't manifested, or they've not blown out of proportion. And obviously, you can retrain your way of thinking as a result to be able to take a backward step. The third point is taking on too much. Obviously, this is a stereotype of the ladies, of multitasking. And if multitasking was a sport, obviously the women would be the best, and they'd be the captain, they'd be the coach, they'd be the star player, and then they'd be on a roll and be able to smash it in terms of that. But when you are taking on too much, you are taking on too much stress. You cannot spin multiple, and probably people have heard this, you cannot spin multiple plates and keep them all spinning in the air without being a headless chicken. It's not possible. In terms of, okay, they will use the example of men of unidimensionally using one task, being proficient at it, and then moving on to the next. I probably think that there's you probably could use the best of both worlds, in terms of, yes, be proficient at one thing, but you are able to then, once you're good at one particular task, you can add an additional one. I'm not saying add in loads. I'm not saying add 10 on one go, because that would be counterproductive, because you wouldn't be able to, as best as you think you can, you can't. It's if I was to use it from a almost said health and safety perspective, health and well-being perspective, if you were to multitask eating and sitting in front of the television, that is not multitasking, because you're not concentrating on what you eat, because you're concentrating on the programming that you're watching. You are mindlessly eating, thus you have no bearing on how much you consume, the type of food that you consume, because your brain can't multitask and be able to do two things at once. It can be very taxing, because you're expecting your brain to switch from one thing to to the next and somehow keep up. Uh, I talk like that sometimes and expect people to follow and keep up, and that's why I've put a guide in front of me to be able to stay on task and be specific so you can follow, as opposed to me going here, there, and everywhere and expecting you to keep up. Obviously, people that have known me over a longer period of time, it's a little bit easier to do that. But if I was expecting you to keep up and I was going down river and then I come back up to the to to the beginning of the stream, and you've never heard me speak, you would be going, well, really stay engaged. Obviously, plus it's a never-ending stream, having been switched between one thing to the next, because obviously you've got to be so switched on to be, have I finished that task till its fullest? Could it be better? Was it the best that I could have done on a particular day? Obviously, I'm catastrophizing now, and I'm going back to worrying. Try to 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 change the way that you start and end your day. This is a bugbear of probably parents of, kids having technology at the table during meal times. Obviously, it would be a big no-no. Try and this was uh, came up in somebody I spoke to last week, of they used technology to unwind. Yes, it's going to get you to be able to distract yourself from the worry. However, it's going to have a negative effect on you from a sleep perspective, because your brain hasn't got the ability now to switch off. You would be better suited to read a book, because obviously you're unwinding, and as a result, or it doesn't have to be a book, say a an audio book, and your phone was on, uh, had a particular night filter, that it's not having as much impact on your eyes. From a morning perspective, if the first thing that you looked at was social media, and it doesn't matter which one, it doesn't matter if it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, if it was negative, if it doesn't matter if it's a comment towards you, a comment towards what was happening in the world, we then have a tendency to want to be more inquisitive with that. So the more that I consume negatively, the more that I'm going to feel like crap. And this is why, from a health perspective, the more that you consume that is good for you, it's going to help you for the better, because in the long run, obviously, you see the benefit of doing it. So when I say technology is bad from this, is obviously it's counterintuitive, and if you're not consciously aware of what you're doing, it's obviously eating away at you under the surface. Additionally, you could write a journal, do activities, do activities that are going to bring you enjoyment. I've put baking, um, and where you're fully immersed in a single task. Like, coming back to what I said with the mail, it's one. I'm going to be a perfectionist in one, and I'm going to come on to the perfectionist bit in a minute. Thus, I'm going to be very, very good at that one task, and then I'll move on to the next. Obviously, repetitive movements like those involved in knitting can add a relaxing. So whatever's going to bring a one-tracked mind, and you do it overly, it's obviously going to make you more and more relaxed. And these are things that are going to add on top of each other to make you feel less of a cynic towards yourself, less worrying about. Because ultimately, if you looked at it rationally, you don't care what anybody thinks externally. You care more about what you think of yourself. So if you're able to be able to chip away at that and look at it rationally, obviously irrationally, it makes no sense to criticize yourself. And Last but not least, we're going to cover perfectionism. From morning to night, this might be that you're looking at after your partner, family, colleague, and you're determined not to let the ball drop. This adds a lot of pressure, and I have harped on with this so many times I've lost count, because obviously a perfectionist is always looking for the ideal situation. So is a procrastinist, and they're two different words. And what I said at the beginning of this live is avoidance of, I'm looking for the opportune moment, for the time to be right. The ducks all have to be aligned. I have to have all my eggs in a basket before I do something. If you were to say to somebody that, oh, this thing needs to be perfect before I do it, well, that's a procrastinist. The person's not, they're using any excuse in the book or anything that they feel comfortable to rationalize the decision to stay where they are and to be comfortable, thus not seeking out to be uncomfortable. It will never get done. Obviously, women who function at this high level can't switch off or ask for help. Obviously, when you are not able to ask for help or guidance, you're not going anywhere. And you see my point, as they're two in the same, and obviously one is 100%, you might argue, and procrastination is 0%. But if you have a mentality of 0 to 100, I'm either all in or I'm not, your motivation is going to be all over the shop. Your essence for growing will be all over the place. If you're constantly switched on, and I mean on in terms of you can't ever get out of your head, you can't ever be able to have an off switch, that's going to affect your sleep, it's going to affect your energy levels. You start suppressing your sleep, you're going into the realms of affecting your mental well-being. Obviously, you have no energy. I can't be bothered to do exercise. I can't be bothered to have any bearing on proper nutrition or the way that I eat, quote unquote, healthily. You're going to be avoiding words such as should and must, because it's far easier to try to implement something new than I should do this. Obviously, should is very difficult because of it. If it's something that you don't perceive as helpful in the long run, it's torment. It's terrible. Why would I want to put myself in an uncomfortable state? I much prefer to stay here. And a must is way out of the sphere, because a must is, I don't care what my brain thinks, my soul, my spirit is, I'm doing it. I don't care what you say, brain, I'm doing it. That is so far removed when you're in that kind of mindset that it's gosh, I can't achieve that. So if I can't achieve that and I perceive that as perfect, ah, we revert back to worry, we revert back to self-sabotage, we revert back to negative self-talk. Thus, you're going to be so far removed from whatever your goal was, as you start right back at the beginning. And I should actually use this hand, right back at the beginning. And from here to there feels like an unsurmountable goal. So honestly, assess priorities, write to tomorrow's list. I've termed it as a future self in the past. so you can let go, and there's less urgency towards stuff. And remember, you don't have to do it all. So that's been today's video. Thank you all for jumping on, and obviously I look forward to seeing many more of you next week. So take care and stay safe.